Hello, welcome to Stories in Time in Focus today. I'm Ellouise Schoettler, your storyteller host, and I'm awfully glad that you're here. We have a very special guest today. She is involved in an extremely important thing that's taking place in Washington, D.C., the Capital Fringe. In fact, she is the director, Juliane Brienza. Hi, Juliane. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Ellouise.
Yeah, really interested to have a chance to just sit down quietly, privately, so we can have a conversation. You know, you really are in the midst of the Fringe right now, aren't you?
We are. We just made our schedule live last Friday, so.
The website looks wonderful.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, really does. And that website is
www.capitalfringe.org, and that's capital with an A, because it's the place and not the building.
Exactly. So everybody be sure and check that out and find out what it's about. Now, if you don't know Capital Fringe, how would you describe the Fringe to somebody that had never heard of it, just quickly?
Well, I think it's important to start where it began. It began in 1947 in Edinburgh, Scotland, when the locals were not allowed to participate in the big arts festival that was happening there. And so they got angry, and they did their shows in pubs and alleyways and churches, and a journalist, Robert Kemp, wrote in the newspaper that the big international arts festival was getting fringed. And they took that word and created the Festival Fringe Society, which now runs the Edinburgh Fringe Festival.
That's sort of like the Impressionists and the Salon des Refusés, isn't it?
So that is now the largest arts festival in the world, and has been for a long time. But the mindset of that, of locals having importance and non-judgmental, taking down judgmental barriers to the performing arts and arts in general, sort of spread all over the world. So I think there's a little over 100 Fringe festivals around the world now. When we started Capital Fringe, there were like 84. Capital Fringe is now the largest unjuried Fringe festival in the United States. It's basically where a lot of things happen at once. Shows are minimal tech. They take place in traditional and non-traditional venues. Most shows don't go over 70 minutes, but they can. Things can be risque, but Fringe does not equal risque. It really equals self-produced, independent performing arts.
It's experimental too, isn't it? That's what I like about it. The people can try things.
You can try a lot of different things. But we actually took the word experimental out of our index this year, because I didn't think that people were using it appropriately. Because I think sometimes when I think of experimental theater or live performance, I'm not thinking of like The Wild Party, which is a play. So we took that out because it was kind of confusing. We actually did do a lot of revamping of how we're categorizing shows to really help the audience.
I noticed that this year that you actually had the performers sort of categorize themselves as to how they saw it, whether one person comedy, drama,
so we had like the four main show dramas that you had to choose from, and then we had a secondary genre that you could choose or you couldn't choose. You didn't have to choose it if it didn't fit. But then we allowed everybody to write 3 words that described their show. I did originally start it with 1 word, but then I actually tried to write it for a show, and I couldn't do it at all.
No.
So
3 words was hard. It was generous. 1 word would have been just really impossible.
I was like, I don't remember what show it was. It was a show from the 2011 festival, but I couldn't do it at all, so we went with the 3 words.
One of the things, as a performer, and this will be my 3rd year, coming as a performer to the Fringe, I love what you do down there. You know, that the venues that you find, the freedom that it gives to the performer to develop their own show, to find it, to change it in the middle if something's not working. You know, that's what I mean by experimental, is that the performer has control over how the show goes.
Yes.
So that's part of your intent also, isn't it?
I mean, I think that's very much in the sort of definition of Fringe. It is, artist controlled. So it wouldn't be Fringe if we were curating or telling people they couldn't do certain things.
Now, how did you get into this?
Well, I grew up in Montana, and I think growing up in a small town and the youngest of 5, I learned a lot about fairness and sort of the power of people's voices and how that can sort of, work. And then I went to school in Wisconsin for theater and visual arts and philosophy, and then I ended up going to Philadelphia for 3 years. I moved there to do an apprenticeship program there at the Art and Theater Company, which is a program that lasts 9 months, and they teach you how to run a nonprofit theater, and it's like 80-hour weeks. It's a really intense thing.
Yeah.
But during the first week of my apprenticeship, it was when the Philly Fringe was going on, and so part of our, work during the day was that we had to go work at the box office or whatever the festival needed us help. And I just really thought it was, I just thought it was amazing. It was a really easy way to meet people. I met just so many different people that I then knew, and I still know, now, like, over a decade or so later. But I met them for the first time then, and also really saw what type of work they were doing,
Right.
And so got to know even more about them. And they also, at the Philly Fringe, had this cabaret, the Fringe Cabaret at night, which was like a bar, and everyone would go and hang out and talk about the shows, and I just thought it was amazing. And so I did that every year that I was there. I was in Fringe shows and worked different things with the festival. And then I decided I didn't want to work in theater, so I moved to Washington, D.C., and I worked at Flashpoint, which is run by Cultural D.C., and I ran their incubator program, and then also programmed the theater lab there, and then started the Mead Theater Lab program during that time. And I also just started to kind of learn about DC and figure out what it was, and it became to be Philly Fringe time, and I had been having sort of just like trouble meeting people. I found it really hard to kind of know where to go, and this was obviously like before Facebook, but I found it really a really closed-in community. So it became Philly Fringe time, and I was like, well, that's the problem. There's no time of year, that everybody gets together,
Sure.
and there's no judgments, and everybody's welcome. It's not like the superstar performers were curated in to do the special, performance series at X Theater. So at that same time, Woolly Mammoth Theater was renting Flashpoint to do something, I don't remember, and the guy who was emailing about it was someone I had known in Philadelphia named Damien, and we sort of ended up, I was like, oh my God, are you the same Damien? I was like, yeah. So we went out to coffee or something, and we talked about Fringe and
How you could do it here?
yeah, and then it just snowballed. I mean, a lot of it was really good timing with the city and with funding, with how the city was committing to being like a creative capital and all of that stuff. So it was good timing-wise. Also, the theater community, I think, was at a place where they could do it.
Right.
So the first year, we had thought we would do about 50 groups in the festival, and we thought that would be amazing, because that's actually what Philly Fringe had in their first year. So we were like, well, let's try that.
Aim for 50, yeah.
So we had 96.
Wow.
It was really...
In your percentage, how many are definitely local, and how many come from out of town?
We're still, after all these years, 'cause this is our 7th year, we're still 50% local. And when we talk about local, we really mean the District of Columbia, because we do get funding, and that is where we are located. Right. And I do understand the dynamics of the DC metro area. But we are about 30% from Maryland, and then it sort of breaks out. But then, like, totally not from this area is like 12%.
Because as a local performer, someone local, one of the things that I really love about the Fringe, and I would imagine that other people do too, is that you get a chance to go down there and see things that are going on from out of the area as well as in the area that you'd never see it just ordinarily.
Yeah.
There, it's such an opportunity.
This year, too, we have a lot of, I'm trying to work a lot more with the embassies. So this is our first year that we have like a partnership with the Israeli embassy, and we have this puppeteer coming that's doing this thing called Puppet Cinema, where he does the long rod puppetry, and
Cool.
then you can also watch it on the screen, so you have like multiple views of it. So I think it's going to be pretty interesting. So we're going to hopefully continue to grow that. But I think it is very important to keep it local.
Right.
Because we do live in a city that is pretty well curated and has a high level of output of theater, that to keep that base of the community is going to continue to grow, I think, where it's not just super professionals, but it's amateurs and people mixing together.
Well, you know, traditionally in theater, there is that mid-level. You have like your amateur, but you have that mid-professional, you know, you professional and whatever. You know, so this is a perfect, you know, that you're going to be drawing from this mid-level of people who are performing professionally, but maybe haven't hit it up here, but that you also are a proving ground.
Yes.
You're really a place where people can be seen.
And it is a way to really grow audiences for a company or an individual, that if they want to do things outside of the festival, they can.
Exactly.
Because, well, I mean, they can anyway, but like it's easier if you have an audience base of people that saw you.
And if you're in a venue, you know, with other performers, you're in this thing. I think that in the visual arts, I came in through the alternative space, and so the Fringe has always appealed to me because it, you know, you have the artist in control of their work, but you're in a setting where you're working with many different people. Just exactly what you're describing as sort of how you made your world here work. Well, we'll be back in just a minute. And we have, I certainly have more questions to ask Juliane, and I'm sure she has the answers.
This is so cool, Dad. This is so cool, Dad.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of siblings in foster care who'll take you just as you are.
Welcome back. We're here to continue talking with Juliane Brienza, the director of the Capital Fringe here in Washington, D.C., which opens
July 12th.
July 12th is right. It's a month.
Yeah. Yeah?
Yeah, a month tomorrow.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, now how do you face that? Are you ready?
I think so. I mean, we have a lot to work on the bar. We do this outdoor bar. It's like a beer tent. It's about 3,000 square feet. We call it the Baldacchino Gypsy Tent Bar.
It was fun, too.
So we have a little bit of work to do on that, but I think we're okay. I think we'll make it.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I noticed last summer was it was very hot.
I know.
We won't go through all of those
It was
things.
118 degrees one day with the heat index, and I got heat stroke.
Oh,
Okay?
did you really?
So I'm very aware of how hot it was.
But it didn't seem to deter people. I mean, I kept slogging up and down those streets to see those programs, and I would choose carefully if I could get into air conditioned. That's where I went. But you know, the enthusiasm for all the programs was high. The weather did not break it.
I had somebody during the heat time ask me if I was going to cancel. And I was like, well, we can't do it at another time. And it wasn't like it's like a hailstorm or a blizzard. You just got to drink enough water.
Right,
And if you can't handle heat, then you can't come.
Well, and the performers, some had come in from out of town. I mean, there was no way.
There was no way to redo. We would just all have lost.
Right.
Hopefully
Now,
it won't be that way this year. We're hoping
well,
it's going to be hot, but let's not be 118.
Right,
That's too much.
right. Wear white.
Yeah,
because
wear white.
it does.
We're painting a lot of the tent stuff's going to be all white.
Oh, cool, cool. That will.
I think it'll help.
Yeah, yeah. Now, let's see. Where was I going with that? So there's a large variety of things for people to see. How much are the tickets?
Tickets are $17, and you have to purchase a $7 button to wear to get into all the venues. But really, the best way to see the festival, if you're planning to go to one show, then obviously you have to buy a single ticket. But if you're planning to see multiple shows, we really do encourage people to buy our passes, because the passes get the ticket price down to as low as $11. And also, it allows you to see multiple shows, which is what we want you to do, because it is a festival. It's not a special event or one person's show. We want you to see at least 4.
But if you think creatively about those passes and say you have an agenda where you want to see a number of tickets, but you have one show you want to take a group to.
We use our passes, that's how we do our group sales. So
okay.
it goes from 4 to 20. We're starting a new pass this year called the Magic Pass, and that's 20 shows. So.
Wow, so you could see just about everything.
You could.
Yeah. Because I think I was telling you earlier that last year, since I'm a solo performer and I looked at the project, the catalog, then I just went to every solo show that was booked into the Fringe last year, and it turned out to be a marvelous master class experience. Not only great shows, but you can learn something from them too. Now, is the Fringe just for people that are interested in the theater?
No, not at all. We're a performing arts festival, so we have dance, puppetry, live music, storytelling, and of course, musical theater, opera. It's everything.
How do you see, in the way that it's gone now, from the first year to now we're at the 7th year, did you expect storytelling to become as much a part of the Fringe as it seems to have?
I don't think I really ever thought about it. I mean, to be honest with you, I hadn't really thought about all the different classifications before. I mean, obviously I thought about music, I thought about dance, but I actually didn't know, and I guess it's one of the things I discovered along the way in building the festival, how strong the storytelling community is here in this area. There's a lot of organizations that do it, but then also with Fringe, if you are a Fringe performer and traveling around the country and the world, that a lot of those people are solo performers, and also just the storytelling aspect of it. It's an interesting thing, because I think some of the people that do solo performance think of themselves as a part of that storytelling community, but then other people think of themselves as part of the theater community, and so it's interesting to see those. Every year we do a solo performance roundtable. It's on one of the Monday nights. I think it's July 23rd this year at 7:30 at Fort Fringe. Please don't actually think that's real. You need to check the website. I may be wrong, but I'm like 95% sure.
That might have been 4 years ago.
No. I'm 95% sure that's correct. But it's one of my favorite discussions that we do at the Training Factory, because so many solo performers and storytellers come to it, and they really just sit and talk to each other, and then they see each other's shows. I find it a community that very much supports itself. They're very much supportive of each other.
Right. One of the things I think that I've noticed in the past couple of years is that, for instance, there was a wonderful show last year, Logic, Luck, and Love, which was for storytellers. The line was so blurred between, do you call it storytelling or do you call it theater? I mean, it was a really well-knit program, and it wasn't a solo performance. They were really working together. And so in some instances, do you see that it's the handle, it's the way in which the performer chooses to describe themselves?
Very much so.
The spoken word covers everything.
Yeah, so this year when we sort of redid the guide and we came up with the genre categories and stuff like that, it was very interesting talking to people about things they had chosen. We had a lot of people choose performance art, and I actually would call people and have to be like, you're really not performance art. You can't use this title. But it wasn't. I'm not saying that as like a negative thing. It was just very interesting to talk to people about why they chose certain categories for themselves,
right,
and their reasoning behind that. It sort of led to me thinking just sort of about education in general, about you know,
Well,
how
even
you
in
learn about
the national
stuff.
market, the festivals, the storytelling festivals, the traditional storytelling festival, so many tellers in these days are using music and other things to augment their storytelling. So they themselves are beginning to blur the edges with what they call themselves. What they're doing is becoming blurred, because I think, or maybe I should ask you what you think about this. Do you think that the audience has anything to do with this blurring?
No, I think it's just sort of a natural progression. I think the important factor is that it is live performance, and that live performance has a certain quality to it, and how you interact with the audience, and how the performer themselves behaves. Like if we had an audience in front of us now, we'd be acting differently.
Maybe so.
So then, so you kind of start there, and then as the story grows or the project grows, then it becomes to define itself in other categories.
Right.
But it really does sort of go back to that. So when you add in music, I don't think it's like the audience really has anything to do with the blurring of that. I think it's just, that's how storytelling.
That's how it's happening.
Not even just storytelling, but just the telling of stories in general. We're using, I mean, even we're painting this mural on one of the buildings at Fort Fringe, and we're of course, it's like mixed media or whatever, but we're doing that because we have to, because of what the structure is, not because we're like thinking that we should, because it would be a good idea. It's like we have to because the building's falling apart and we have to put this wheat pasted thing over
You're
it.
disguising it.
Yeah, so it's sort of, you know, you have to come at it maybe through different angles.
Right. Well, that's what I see happening with the storytellers, you know, that they're expanding or contracting. Storytelling was actually originally the oral art form, which was more like conversation. You know, it was in a room, or, you know, in a gathering, or whether it's a campfire or what, you know, even as storytelling started in the olden times, you know, it was more conversational. Now that it's moved to the stage,
It's
exactly
morphing.
what you're
Yeah.
describing is
Yeah, because
the setting.
when I was growing up, we had, I grew up in Montana, so we had a lot of like the cowboy poetry stuff going on, and a lot of the campfire stories. Like even in school, we'd have someone come, like a storyteller come, and like we had to like pretend we were around a campfire. Like we would sit in a circle, and he would tell us stories. So it was, you know, but now, I mean, I don't, if that person came to the Fringe Festival to do a show, we're not all sitting around a campfire. You got to figure out how to adjust.
Yeah.
And it is, I think does that make sense?
Oh yeah, it makes a lot of sense. The other thing is the use of the word storytelling, which is everywhere. An ad is good storytelling. A movie is good storytelling. A song is a good story. You know, that it's in the past 10 years, that's just the word storytelling blankets anything that's happening where people are trying to communicate with someone. You know, have you noticed that? That it's just a universal term, which sometimes storytellers want to say, well, now really, please. That's not all that it is. You know, that's not all that's there. When do you start with a new Fringe? This is a 12-month job for you,
It
isn't it?
is, yeah. So we do Fall Fringe as well, which is like 12 to 15 productions, which is small. I mean, the big festival is 134, and the Fall Fringe is in November, and that's for 18 days as well. But we get the applications out for next year's festival in October, and then they're due in January. But there's always, like, there's a lot to do all the time, just from fundraising to figuring out better ways to do things, to, you know, we have a very, in DC and maybe the whole DC metro area, there's a real lack of performance venues right now, and we keep losing venues, so there's a lot of, we're doing a lot of strategic thinking. We're in the process of a strategic plan to sort of figure that out.
Interesting.
like how, because even this year, I mean, I'm like $9,000 over in my venue budget because it was like at the last minute we had to do all these things because we lost venues, and so I'm hoping it's just a very interesting challenge.
Nonprofit organizations live on interesting challenge. don't
Yes, yes.
they? Yes, and
I
they're
live it
all,
every day.
all runs around. Because one thing is that I've seen that you do is that when you buy that button, you don't lose that.
No.
Because you can use it all year long for
Yes,
special
you can.
things that
So
come
during
up.
the festival time, we have about 25 to 30 discounts at restaurants and like retail sort of stuff during the month of July. But then every other month during the year, we usually have between 7 to 10 discounts to shows and really whatever seems interesting and I can dig up.
Now, we're going to lose our time in a minute, and I want to make one point that hasn't been made. How big is your staff?
Employees, I have 3. That includes one of them is me. As we lead up to the festival, we start growing, but during the festival itself, we're 50 people.
See, this should give people a real view of the energy that goes into it, that things like this, you know, starts with a few people putting blood and sweat into it for a long time.
And tears.
And tears, blood, sweat, and tears, yes, into it for a long time. And that one of the main concerns is money. Money to pay the few staff members that you have and to provide the venues and all of that stuff. That this doesn't just happen.
No.
It's not
it
a
does
magic
not.
ride, is
Not
it?
at all. There is magic involved.
Yes, there is.
But it is magic that is conjured.
Yeah.
It doesn't come along on its
I
own.
used to call that smoke and mirrors. Yeah. Listen, it's a wonderful conversation. I hope that you know, people will have more of an understanding, you know, not only of the Fringe, but of what it takes to bring the Fringe to the DC area. And I thank you for doing it. It's a wonderful event, and we're looking forward to it again. It starts the 12th of July and runs to the 29th. So you'll watch the paper, watch the Facebook, Twitter, and just follow along with where things are going to be happening downtown DC. Thank you for coming. Come back.